All right, I think we're live. So sorry, everybody. I was literally just finishing up writing the article for this post, and yeah, I completely lost track of time. I just got off vacation. My voice is a little bit sore right now, or kind of losing my voice. So if the stream sounds funny, sorry about that. But yeah, I really wanted to stream today. Got in late last night, and we are ready to go. So let me share my screen right now, and we'll just get things started. All right, I need to make sure I'm sharing the right screen. And let me try to zoom in here so everyone can see everything. So set this to 150. Let me know if the screen size is too small. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm watching the chat. Uh, Last stream, we actually had some issues with the audio. Apparently, the audio was coming from the mic and not this microphone, or from the camera and not the microphone. So let me know if it sounds bad, and we'll just get going. But before I start watching the comments and seeing the response, making sure the audio is good, quick context here. I went on vacation this last week, and I was actually at Lake Shasta, Northern California. And like always on vacation, I get really bored, and I decided to take a look at FastAPI because a lot of people ask me about it. I usually don't spend too much time looking into new tech, but I did spend some time doing some research, built out a CRUD application, wanted to learn more about it. So that's what I did. Wrote up an article, and now I want to stream and make a little crash course on this. And yeah, just see what comes up with this, or see what we come up with here, what we finally produce here, and then eventually maybe make some more tutorials on this and a full course. Okay, so audio is good. Again, sorry about my voice. I'm trying to drink water here, but let's go ahead and check this out. So down in the video description, I have this link to this article on Medium right here. So I literally just wrote this up on the plane ride home yesterday from Washington to Las Vegas. And I put this together. So we're going to have the link to the source code that will be added at the end of the tutorial. And here's going to be the structure. So first, I'm going to take a look at FastAPI versus Django. I want to make a comparison. Then we'll go into the installation of FastAPI. We're going to create our first application, our first route, and then we're going to look into the Swagger UI docs. If you don't know what that is, you'll see it in a minute. Then we'll go into adding path parameters, and then we'll go ahead and go into using post, put, and delete requests. And then after that, we're actually going to be working with a fake database. We're just going to use like a dictionary, just a Python object. After we go through all the put, post, and delete requests, we're going to add in database models, and then we're actually going to start working with those database models. So we're simply just going to build out an API. There's not going to be a front end, and we're just going to get working with this. So everyone's saying audio is okay. Awesome. All right. So yeah, I'm shucking up today. I woke up with about 4 hours of sleep, and I just wanted to crank this article out and finish it. But yeah, look through this. Anything that I don't know, or anything that I maybe don't say correctly, I'll try to add to the article. Leave that in the comment section, and I will update this. The article probably does have a bunch of spelling mistakes. I did not look through it. I just wrote it up and sent it out, published it on Medium. So this will be fixed. So if I don't know something that well, or I don't explain it, we'll just go ahead and fix this later. Okay, so this is going to be the guide. I wrote this kind of for myself here because, again, I just learned FastAPI. I can't just learn and teach something without at least having a guide like this. If it's Django, obviously I can just go with it because I know it like the back of my hand, but FastAPI is new to me. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And I guess before we get started, I want to give a big thank you to Agora. That is the company that I work at. I'm a software developer there, and Agora actually allows me to do stuff like this. So I obviously still can make money from my courses, from my YouTube channel, but I am technically on Agora's time right now, and Agora provides an awesome SDK for audio and video integration. That's an awesome platform that they have. I love to use it. And I just want to give them a shout out since I'm technically on their time right now, and they are endorsing this right here. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's see. Just kind of watching the chat. Audio's good. Looks like everyone's ready to go. And I'm sure not everyone will stick through with the stream, but it's going to be posted after. So it will be a full video if it goes great and if there's no major issues. Otherwise, I'll just remake it. Okay, so I'm going to be using this guide. I recommend you use it too. But with this, I'm just going to go ahead and follow along. So first of all, let's start with the comparison to Django. So it's too early for me to tell which one's better or what I like better. One thing I'll say right up front here is I personally still am going to use Django as my go-to just because I'm used to it, but I also think it's a much better tool if I'm building out a full-scale application. Specifically, I love the fact that Django gives me everything that I need in one place. It structures my applications, and it gives me things like authentication, password reset, all this functionality all in one place. Now, with that being said, one of the things that I noticed about FastAPI that I really like is its support for async. And I love the fact that it's built for building out APIs, which means that I'm not having to serialize my data every single time I'm trying to render out some kind of model or dictionary. I just render it out and it's already serialized because FastAPI is already built for that. FastAPI is a more lightweight framework. So it means that you're going to have to construct all of the things yourself, piece it all together. So that's kind of what I like about Django, is that usually it's set up for me and it's easier to get started. But other than that, I'm not going to really make a comparison. After a week of studying FastAPI and only doing it just in my free time, I can't really make a decision here, but I'm just going to let you decide that for yourself once we start using it. And then maybe in a couple months, once I'm comfortable with it, I'll actually do a breakdown. Okay, so the first thing to do with FastAPI to get started is we're just going to go ahead and install it. So I'm going to open up my command prompt here. I'm going to be using Windows here. So we'll just open this up, and I won't create a virtual environment. If you want to do that, go ahead and do it. But I'm going to cd into my desktop here, and we're just going to run pip install FastAPI. So that's all we need to install FastAPI. We run that installation, and then any other installations we need, we'll just add to it. So FastAPI is installed. I'll close this out, and I'm actually going to use the terminal from VS Code. So let's go ahead and create a new folder, and we're going to start from scratch here. So we're going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this my API. So I'm going to follow the guide that I created. In the guide, this is how we're going to call our project. So let's go ahead and do that. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and just open this up in VS Code. So I'm going to need to drag everything into the screen on my right here. And let's go ahead and just open up this new project here. So FastAPI, we have an empty folder, and that's it. So FastAPI is very lightweight, so it's going to look a little bit like Flask in the beginning. It's not like Django where you get all this boilerplate code. So the first thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and create a file called main.py. And this is going to be that main file that gets everything started with our application. So we're just going to go ahead and create this file. And let me just prep my article here. Let me move this over so I can actually see it. Okay, so sorry, 1 second. Okay, so we're going to create our main.py file. And from here, we're just going to go ahead and configure our application. So we're going to import FastAPI. So from FastAPI, import, and then the FastAPI class. What did I do here? I removed that. So FastAPI like that. Okay, so we make our import. And then once we do that, we set up our app here. So this is the core configuration to our app here. So whatever you call this variable, this is what we're going to start using. So we'll call this app, and then we're going to use the FastAPI class, and that's how we initiate our application. Now, to create our first route, you're going to see how easy this is. All we're going to do is use a decorator, and we're going to use app.get. So this is going to be the request method. So we have app right here. So we're specifying the method, and then we're going to specify the route. And then once we do that, we just create the function that's going to respond to this route here. So we're just going to call this get items. And this route is simply going to return back a list of items. So this is going to be like a to-do list or an items list. It doesn't really matter. The first thing we're going to do, though, is respond with a list of items. And then we'll actually get a single item and then work with CRUD operations with that. Okay, so we have our route. We have our function here. And we're just going to return back a list. So at this point, let's just go ahead and add in a list like that. So we'll just do item 1, then we'll do item 2 and 3. So we'll just return back some items here. All right, so main.py file, we have that here. We have our function. And now to start up our server, what we're going to do is we're going to need to install something called UVcorn. And this is going to be our async server. So let's go ahead and just move this over. And we're going to run a pip install. And I'm a little bit too zoomed in, so let me actually zoom out here and move this over. And we're just going to run pip, whoops, let's clear this. We'll do pip install UVcorn. Okay, so we're going to run this installation. And now to start up our server, we're just going to go ahead and go into UVcorn. Then we'll go into our main.py .py file. So whatever you call this file right here, go ahead and specify that. And then we're going to go ahead and start up our app right here. So we're going to do main :app, and then we'll just do -- reload. Now, reload is going to basically, it's kind of a little bit like live server where it refreshes our application every time we make a change. You don't want to use this in production, but in testing, this is a great tool to use. Okay, so let me make sure I'm doing this right. So UVcorn, main app, and reload. Of course, during live streams, this stuff happens all the time. I might need to change this right here. Okay, let's see. Of course, we're going to run into our first issue right away, but did I install UVcorn? Let's try this one more time. Pip install UVcorn, clear it, and then we'll just do UVcorn. All right, first issue. Let's go. Let's try to figure this out. Let's try running this from the command prompt. Main, and then app -- reload. UVcorn is not recognized. Okay, so I must have not installed it. Let's try that one more time. This is where the chat can help if you guys know what's going on here. Okay, let's see. No issues until the stream. That cracks me up. All right, let me do it. I'm gonna try to run this from my command prompt. Let's just see what happens here. So I'm gonna, yeah, we'll just use the command prompt. So we'll cd into desktop, then my API. What do I call this file? Okay, I'm gonna need a second here. So my API, yeah, I called it that. That's on my desktop. Something that should have took a second. Now it doesn't work. All right, so UVcorn. All right. Not the path. I mean, looks like I'm in the path. This is too funny. All right, I'm gonna need a second here. All right, Praveen, you're a Python guy. What the heck am I running into here? Let's see. Praveen is in the chat, so check the path. Yeah, I mean, all right. Let's just try this again. Let's go ahead and set up our virtual environment. Maybe that's going to help us. So let's just do virtual env, and we'll just set up the environment. We'll just install everything here. All right. Pip install FastAPI. We'll need to reinstall that since this is inside of our virtual environment. Pip install. All right, there we go. Yeah. All right, so we got past that. It took way longer than needed to, but here we go. We started our server with that command that was UVcorn, and then we specified main app, and then we just did -- reload. Okay, so this is going to open up our application or turn on our server on port 8000. So I already have this bookmarked here, but if you want to open up a tab here, go ahead and go to port 8000 right here. And this is the response that we get. So it took a little bit longer than we thought, but yeah, this is our first route, and it's very easy to set that up. As you look at the code here, you can see that there's not much to it. We just have about 5 lines of code, and that's it. So that's our first route, and we are ready to move on to the next step. So with this, FastAPI works with Swagger UI. It gives us basically this UI for our docs. So right now, if I open up my route here, at any point, if I just go ahead and do /docs with a pound symbol or a hashtag, whatever you want to call that, this is the docs that we're going to get. So essentially, every single route that we add, we're going to get the route right here, and we have a way to actually interact with this route here. So this is going to be very useful when we're sending post, put, and delete requests. We're not having to use something like Postman. We can actually interact with our docs right here and get back information. So if I want to test that first route, we open up this path right here, and we can just go ahead and click on try it out. And right here, we can click execute, and here is that response. So we see all the items, we see information about our route, everything that occurred here, and that's essentially just going to give us a bunch of information. So FastAPI comes with Swagger UI built in with this already, and we get this awesome interface. So we're going to use this quite a bit here. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next step, and we're going to talk about path parameters here. So before we actually start working with path parameters and getting back a single object, what I'm going to do here is create a fake database. So we're just going to go ahead and create a fake database as an object here, and then later on, we're actually going to create a real one. So let's just go ahead and do fake database. And this is going to be an object here. And inside of this object, we're going to specify an ID for each object. And then we're just going to go ahead and specify the task. And at this point, we're just going to have an item called task, or an item with an attribute of task. And then we'll just specify some values here. So we'll do clean car. And then let's just go ahead and duplicate this, and we'll just make 3 items. We'll set this to the ID of 2, and this value has to be unique. Otherwise, we're going to have conflicting errors. So we'll just go ahead and do write blog, and then we'll do start stream. All right, so now at this point, what I can do is go ahead and return back this fake database, paste that in, and let's take a look. Let's just make sure it's working. So we're just going to keep using the docs here. So remember, we have our port, and then docs, pound symbol, and then / right there. Well, I guess the / will be added by default. So if I refresh that, and then we want to test this again, let's go ahead and click try it out. We'll click execute, and here we go. We see all of our tasks right here inside of this object, and then we see each item. Okay, so yeah, I see someone asking about the stream. Will I save it? Absolutely. This stream will be live after. And I see someone talking about coding. Coding is easy. Yep. Within the first couple of minutes, I'm already running into an error. And it's kind of a stupid error, but it happens. Okay, so let's give back a single item now. So let's go ahead and create another route. So we're just going to go ahead and do app.get. So the request method is going to be get because we are retrieving some information. And then we want to go ahead and throw in a path parameter. And for this, we're just going to use the curly braces, specify the parameter name. At this point, I can call this whatever I want. I'm just going to call it ID. So in this case, we're just going to get this ID value here. Now in the function, let's go ahead and actually pass this value into the function. Let's go ahead and call this get item. So instead of get items, it's going to be get item. It's not plural. And for this, we need to go ahead and pass in the ID value. And I'm just going to specify the type of, or the data type that this ID needs to be. So I'm just going to do colon, and I'm going to say this needs to be an integer. So if we don't get an integer here, this is going to throw an error. So we just want to go ahead and throw that in. And now we are expecting an ID passed in here, and that's going to be in the path. Now to get the actual item, let's go ahead and just do return. And we're just going to go into our fake database, and we're just going to go ahead and get the ID value. So we'll just go ahead and throw that ID. So it's either going to be 1, 2, or 3. If we go outside of that limit, it's not going to give us back an item. And this is how we can use a path parameter to get a single item. So if I go back into my Swagger UI docs here, go ahead and refresh this again. Now I'm going to see 2 paths, or I should. Okay, so when I refresh this, now I see a second path. I see get item. I see the fact that there's an ID there. So if I want to try this out, we can actually see that parameter listed out here. So if I click try out, we need to pass in an ID. So let's get the first item. So we'll click 1 or pass in 1, execute, and here we have our first item. So we have clean car. And if I go to the second item, we can do 2, execute, and now we're getting right blog, and then we can go to 3 and so on. So that's how we can work with path parameters and actually pass in dynamic values. So this can be something like a post or maybe a user profile where you pass in that user ID and you get back a single item. Okay, so let's go ahead and start working with post, put, and delete request. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I keep looking at the article here, so I'm actually following this. Again, for anybody that doesn't know, this is linked up in the video description. So we're moving on to post, put, and delete request here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to send a post request. So you're going to notice that, let me try to zoom in here. So you're going to notice that we're going to use app.post instead of app.put. And we're also going to send the user to the same URL path as the get items route. So essentially, we're sending the user to the same path, but depending on what the request method is, whether it's a post or put, we're going to change which view or which route actually responds to this. So if we see a post request, we're actually going to trigger this function. If we see a get request, we're going to get all the items. So let's go ahead and actually build this out. So I'm going to move this over here, and let's go back into our code. All right, and I just clicked on Slack, so that's probably going to open up in a second. Just need to close that out. That's in my other screen. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do app.post now. So we're sending a post request. The URL pattern is the same as get items. And now we're handling a post request, and we're just going to do add item. Okay, so at this point, we have a few different ways we can go about doing this. And what I want to do here is show you 3 different methods, and maybe there's more, but I'm going to show you 3 different ways of how we can actually send data through the request body and actually process it. And at any point, if you see my face covering the code here, let me know. I'm going to try to pay attention to that, but I'm going to always make sure that you can see this. So I might miss it. Just go ahead and say something in the chat. Make sure I notice it. Okay, so I just got an alert that, or a message from Praveen that my code was overlapping it. Okay, so I'll just try to make sure that that's not happening anymore. Okay, so to add an item, what we're going to do here is we're going to pass in the value that we want from the request body. So we're going to say we want a task, and this value needs to be a string. So specifically, this value right here is a string. So I'm going to say that from the request body, we are trying to get the task, and we want that sent as a string. So we're only sending one parameter at this point. So let's go ahead and return this, and we are going to add this to our database. So we're just going to return back a fake database. And to actually add this item, what I'm going to do here is go ahead and create a new ID first. And I'm just going to go ahead and go through this object right here. So obviously, after I refresh, any items we add to this database are going to be removed. So it's going to be temporary. So at this point, we're just looking in that dictionary, and we're going to go ahead and go into fake databases.keys. And we just want to count the amount of keys. So right now there's 3. So that means the next item that we have here will be 4, 5, and then it'll just keep incrementing that way. So we're creating a new ID here, and we're going to say, go ahead and give us all the keys or give us the count, and then go ahead and add in a new value. So we're creating an ID, and then we're going into fake databases. We'll throw in the new ID value, and then we'll just go ahead and set that new object here. So we're going to set task, and then that's going to be the actual string value sent from the front end. Okay, so let's go ahead and check this out. So if I go back into the docs UI, we'll open this up. If I refresh this again, we'll just remove that URL. Now we're going to see another path here. Try to refresh that. Okay, so now we see add item. We see that it's going to take a post request. If I click here, and if I look here, now I see another parameter that I can actually pass in here. So I'll go ahead and click on try it out. And let's just say new item added during, I can spell, during stream. Okay, so that's a parameter that we're going to send via post request. So we're just going to go ahead and execute this. And down here, we should get back a list of all of our tasks or items. And this item should be added. So we'll click execute. If everything went well, here we go. Now we see item 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is the new item added to that fake database that we have. So that object. Okay, so that's a post request. Now I want to show you another way we can go about doing this. Okay, so we have something called Pydantic, and I'm going to try to give you my explanation of Pydantic. So Pydantic basically allows us to design schema for data that we're sending. So it's like a data validation tool that we can actually use here. So essentially, here's the problem that we can run into. Right now, we're only adding a task. But imagine if we were adding something like, let's say, I'm trying to think of a name or a kind of value, but let's just say we want to throw in something like created. So we want to know when this item was created. Then we'd have to do a string right here. We want to know some kind of rank to this task, like a priority rank. We would have to throw in an integer and so on. So if we're passing in all these parameters, this can get very messy. So this method doesn't really work well if we're sending a lot of data. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use Pydantic to create a class that's going to create our data structure, and it's going to handle all the validation and all the information that we need. And then we're just going to throw in that class in here. So we're still on that post request. So this is the second option. I'm going to show you 3 in total of how we can actually get this data. So for this, let's go ahead and create a new file, and we're going to call this schemas.py. So in schemas.py, let's go ahead and from Pydantic, we're going to import base model. Okay, so Pydantic, I'm not sure if I need to run an import in the documentation or in that article. I wrote that we have to import this, but we'll just see right now. And if we don't, I'll update the article. So we're just going to go ahead and create a class here, and this will be our item. And this is going to inherit from base model. And inside of the class, we're just going to go ahead and say that we're going to have an attribute of task, and this value needs to be a string. Okay, so let's see if we have any errors. So far, no. So I don't think we need to import this. It might be already with FastAPI by default. So once we have this, we're just going to go ahead and go back into main.py. Again, the class right now is minimalistic, but once we start adding a bunch of values, that's where you're really going to need this. So inside of main.py, I'm just going to go ahead and import schemas. So we want to make sure we have access to that. So we import schemas. And this desk that I have does not work well, so I keep messing up things that I'm clicking on my keyboard because I have very little space. So we imported that, we created the class, and now we can go down into add item. And let's just remove this. So this is what we just had at this point. So we have our task and then the value. And instead, what I want to do here is go ahead and throw in the item object. And we're just going to go ahead and tell the route here that we're going into schemas.item. So we have a lowercase item and a uppercase item here. So that's from this class here. So now the data structure has to represent what we have in here. So it's going to look a little bit different in that post request. So now what we're going to do here is go ahead and still create a new ID. But for this task, we're going into item.task. So we're actually going into this class right here, and we're getting that task value. So if I go ahead and look at my Swagger UI docs here, let's just open this up. We'll refresh it again. All right, let's go ahead and just click refresh. We'll go back into post. I want to make sure it's all saved, so it's all working. And let's just go ahead and send that. Okay, so with that, our schema looks a little bit different right here. So now we see this object. So when I click try it out, we're going to see this object. And right now it's telling us that we need to send a task. So let's say I wanted to require another parameter. Let's just go ahead and actually test this. We'll just say rating. Let's just do that. Let's just say we're creating some kind of object that has a rating system. So we'll do rating, and then we're going to say this is an integer. So if I go ahead and go back in here and refresh this, we should see that as a required parameter. So let's try it out. And here we see rating. So it's replicating that data structure. So Swagger UI, someone's asking, is that Swagger API? Yeah, Swagger is already built into it. I'm trying to remember the best explanation. I might add that into the documentation or into the article, but FastAPI already comes with Swagger built into it. So it's using Swagger. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove that and let's test this. So I'm trying not to ramble too much here. So we'll refresh it. Let's make sure this works. So we're going to click try it out, and we'll just go here and we'll just say added using Pydantic. And let's go ahead and execute it. There we go. Added using Pydantic. Perfect. So it's all working. Okay, so some of you may not know your data structure right away, or maybe you just want to access the request body and just access the data and parse that data as you please. I like doing that with Django, where when I send data, I just go ahead and access that request body, and then I get whatever item I need. So let's go ahead and actually use that method next. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm just going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to comment out this option right here. And let's actually paste it in one more time, comment this out. And I just want to go ahead and leave you both items or both values in the source code. So we'll do task and then string. And then for this right here, we'll just do task. So we have option 1. I'll just comment that right here. And then we'll do option 2. And then for option 3, we're just going to go ahead and access the request body. So option number 3. Okay, now for this, we're going to have to import the body class. So this is going to give us access to the request body. And we're just going to go ahead and change this up right here. So down here, what we need to do is go ahead and change up the actual schema here. So give me a second. I'm looking at my notes. Let's see. How was I planning to do this? Give me a second here. I actually don't remember. I just studied this over the weekend. I'm trying to figure this out. Okay, so here we go. So we're just going to do body, and this is going to be equal to the body class like that. So that's going to give us access to it. And then let's just go ahead and change this value. So we're just going to go into body, and then that should give us a dictionary. So we can just access the task like that. Okay, so I think that's it. That gives us access to the request body. So let's test it from the front end. All right. Let's go back here. Okay, so there's a few issues with this method. Right now, if I'm using Pydantic, we're just going to see that it's taken in a string value. So now it's up to us to decide that data structure. So if I click try it out, we see the string. I'm going to have to manually create this request here. So we're just going to do task, and then we're going to throw in new item using request body method. Okay, so this should work. Make sure you're using double quotes here, because when this is being parsed in the back end, this needs to be in double quotes and not single quotes. So let's go ahead and test it. We'll execute it, and there we go. So it worked. Okay, so let's recap our post methods. It took a little bit longer than I would like to in a normal tutorial, but I wanted to show you all 3 options. So in option 1, we just go ahead and pass in the parameter that we need, set the value, and then throw in that value. Option number 2, we just go ahead and use Pydantic, create the database or create the schema, and use that item to specify the schema here. And then we just add the item by accessing that value from that request body. And then here we manually created that request body. So what I'm going to do here is by default leave it at option number 2. I think the best route or the best way about going or the best way about doing this is to use option number 2. So I'll just leave that here, and let's go ahead and move on to put requests. So a little recap, post requests are usually meant for adding data to a database. Put requests are usually meant for updating and modifying data in a database. And then delete requests are usually, well, for deleting data. So let's go ahead and go to the next section. So we'll just do app.put. So we're specifying the request method. And at this point, the route needs to be / and then we're just going to go ahead and throw in an ID. So it's the same route as get item here. We're just passing in the ID as a path parameter. And then we're just going to go ahead and call this update item. Okay, so give me a second here. Let me just refresh my memory. So we're going to go ahead and call update item. We're going to pass in the ID. This needs to be an integer. So we first need to grab the item that we want. And then we're just going to go ahead and grab the request body. So the data that's being sent over, we're going to get item. We're going into schemas dot item. So that's the data that we're going to send over. And then let's go ahead and return back our fake database. Okay, so we want to update this item. So we're going into fake database, and then we're going to pass in the ID, and we're just going to modify the specific task here. So we're going into task. I'm not covering up the code here. No, we're good. Okay, so we're throwing in the task itself, and we're just going to say that the task is going to be item.task here. So that's all we're doing. We're going to the same route. Now this function right here will handle all put requests. We're getting the ID, we're getting the value from the front end, and we're updating it, and we're returning that database. So if I go back to my docs here, refresh it, we should see this new path here. Okay, so I should see a put request. Okay, so it took a second. Here we have update items. So notice that the path is the same. So now it's going to require an ID and a request body. So if I go ahead and click try it out, we see the ID. So let's say I want to update the first item. So we're going into the first item. And then for the task here, we're just saying updated our first item. And let's go ahead and send it. All right, so we see our first item. It's updated here. Write blog, start stream. So all our other items. So if I want to update another item, we're just going to go to item 2. So item 2 right now is write blog. So we're just going to update this right here. So we'll just say write blog updated. All right, and it's misspell here, it's updated. And let's go ahead and send that put request. Write blog updated. Perfect. So that's our put request. Okay, so now let's move on to deleting data. So for this, we're going to send a delete request, and it's going to be a little bit like our update item here. So at this point, we're just going to go ahead and copy our app.put request. We're going to change this to delete. We still need the same path here. So we have 3 paths that are the same. This one will handle all delete requests. So we're going to change this to delete item. We're sending an integer. Now we don't need to send any data here with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove this right here. So at this point, we're just going to go ahead and delete this specific item. So I don't need this. We're just going to do del. That's going to delete this specific key from this fake database. So from this dictionary. So we're just going to delete it, and then we're returning back our fake database. So now let's test this out. We'll go back into the front end here. Let's refresh it. It always takes a minute. And while it's reloading, let me just check the chat here. All right. Cool. 116 people in the stream. Awesome. Okay, and just for the record, this will be posted after. Okay, so now we have our delete request. So we have our delete request. All we need to do is specify the item that we want to delete. So let's delete the first item. We'll just go ahead and click or add in 1 for the ID. We'll execute it, and here we go. So now we only have 2 items in our database. If I want to delete the second item, we'll just add in 2, execute, and there we go. Now we have 1 item in our database. So if I go to get items, try it, execute it, that's all we have. Awesome. Delete is working. All right. So up until now, we've been working with a fake database. Now it's time to create a real database. So for the ORM, we're going to be using SQL Alchemy with FastAPI. You can use whatever database you want. We're going to be working with relational databases. So we'll use SQLite. Typically, I would use something like Postgres, but if you want to use something like MongoDB, I don't see any reason why you couldn't use it. But we're going to focus on SQLite. This can work with any database here. So let's go ahead and start building this out. So we're going to go ahead and go into our application again now. And we need to start setting this up. So the database part, I'm going to be honest with you. This is the part that I was literally writing up the article right before the stream. That's actually why I started at 15 minutes late. So there's going to be certain things that I might not fully understand. I know how to make it work, but I might not give you the best explanation. So if I don't give you the best explanation, go into the article after the stream and I'll try to update certain definitions and things that we're doing. So this specific article right here, go ahead and look at this after the stream. I'm going to try to update it. Again, if you have something in the comment section that you want to say, let me know in the comment section and then we'll actually modify this. So in this article, we are on database and models. So we're in that section. The first thing we're going to do is install SQL Alchemy. That's our ORM to work with our database. then we're going to create a database.py file. This is how we're going to configure our database. Once we create it, we're going to write some code here, and then we're going to create our model to represent the actual database tables. So for those of you that don't really know how models work or how database structures work, typically in Python, you would create a class that would represent a database table. So the actual table would be the class, the columns in that table would be the attributes in a class, and then each individual instance would be the row in that table. So we're just creating like a replica of how that's supposed to look and designing the schema. Okay, so let's go back up here and let's start working with that. So we're going to add in a database.py file. And in here, I'm going to run some imports, and I'll just try to explain as best as I can in what we're importing and why we're doing it and what we're using. So the first thing is going to be from SQL. Oh, I forgot. I need to run a pip install. Okay, so go ahead and activate my virtual environment. Pip install SQL Alchemy. All right, so that should be installed. And let's go ahead and start those imports. So from SQL Alchemy import. So let's see, what was this first import? So this is going to be create_engine. So this function is going to create our database engine. So this is where we specify where our database is going to be, the type of database, and where it's going to sit. Or I already said that. So the database type, so whether that's SQLite, Postgres, and so on, the file path to it, and the actual database name. So that function will help us create that. Then we're going to do from SQL Alchemy .ext, then .declarative, and then I keep spelling declarative wrong. So from SQL Alchemy ext declarative, let's import declarative _ base. All right, and the last import we need is going to be from SQL Alchemy .orm import session maker. Okay, so we have our imports, and the first thing we need is to create our database engine. So we'll just do creates database engine. So we're going to go ahead and make a comment first and then actually create it. So the engine here is going to be create engine. Then we're going to specify the database type. So this is going to be SQLite. Then we're going to do : ////, and then we're going to do todo.db. So that's going to set the file path for my database, and it's going to create a database here once I actually execute this, and it's going to be called todo.db. Okay, so that's the database engine. Now, the next thing we need to do is go ahead and set or create a base class here. And I'll be honest with you, I need to do some more research on what base actually is doing, or declarative base. But at this point, let's just go ahead and use a declarative base function. I know that this returns a class that gives us ways to access the actual database. So we're just going to go ahead and add that, and then I'll update this in the article later. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and do session local. So this is how we actually work with our database and have sessions with it so we can access it, update items, retrieve items, and so on. So we're going to create the session local class, and this will be session maker. And we're just going to bind the engine. Then we're just going to go ahead and do expire _on. I'm not blocking the code here. So expire on, and then we'll just do commit. And this is going to be false. Okay, so we made our imports. We have our database engine. We set up the base class, session local using session maker, and we are ready to move on to the next step here. So once we have that, we're going to go ahead and go into our models here, and we need to actually define our database tables. So we're going to create a new file called models.py, and in here, we're just going to go ahead and import some things from SQL Alchemy. So from SQL Alchemy, we're going to import column for our database tables here. So column, integer for the data type, And then we're just going to go ahead and throw in string. So we need an integer and a string. And SQL alchemy. Just want to make sure that's spelled right. Okay, so we also need from database, we need to import that base class. So import base, and let's go ahead and actually create the database table now. So this is going to be called item. We're going to inherit from base. After that, we're going to go ahead and create our table name. So double underscore right here. And then we're just going to go ahead and call our table name double underscore is going to be items. So that's going to be a string value. And then we need an ID. For the ID, you can use a UID, whatever you want here. At this point, I'm just going to go ahead and do column, and we're just going to make this an integer. So we imported integer. So we'll do integer, and then we're going to set this to the primary key. So this will increment by default, so we won't have to do that addition for the auto incrementing like we were doing in the front end for that fake database. Okay, so we specified the ID. Then we want a task here. So that's going to be a string value. So we'll do column, and then we're going to do string. And then we're going to set the limit here to, let's just do 256 characters. So that seems to be the standard. So for now, we'll just leave it like that. And that is our database table. So we can add a lot more. We can create relationships, but we're not getting into that right now. We just want to know how to create, add, update, and delete items from this database. So we created the database. We have our model now. And now it's time to actually access this database and create it. So we still don't have our database here in the file here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into main.py and we're going to make some imports and actually create that database. So first of all, we're going to import depends here from FastAPI. Then we want to import, import our models. So we just created the models. So we want to import all of that. And then after our models, we want to go ahead and import some stuff from our database. So from database, that's this file right here. We want to import, I see Python engineer in the chat. Yep, it's time for FastAPI. I've done too much Django stuff. No, we're just going to work with FastAPI for a little bit. I just worked with it over the weekend or over this last week and wanted to make a video on it. So from database import, we're going to import base, engine, and we're going to import, give me a second. So engine, session, local, and then from SQL Alchemy, we're going to import session. Not used to this keyboard after a week of not using it. So SQL Alchemy.orm import right. So we have our imports. Now, to actually create this database, what we're going to do is we're going to access base, and then we're going into metadata.create_all, and we're going to throw in our database engine. So what's going to happen here is if we don't have a database yet, this right here will create our database using the engine configuration right here that we have in database.py. So it's going to create a database called to do in this file path here. If we have it, it's not going to create it. So on that first initiation, it's going to go ahead and set that up for us. So if I go ahead and refresh that, so I saved it, now you see todo.db. So here is our database. It's an SQLite database. We're not going to work with any plugins to actually see that data. It's there though. Later on, if you're using something like Postgres, that's where you can see the database tables. But right now, we're not going to worry about actually seeing anything there. So that's what this did. It goes ahead and creates that database. Someone's asking if we're using Flask. No, this is FastAPI. Okay, so we create the database. Now, the next thing we need to do is get the session. So I'll be honest with you. I was reading up documentation. I didn't spend a lot of time on this next section here. But all I understand is that we're going to create a function that's going to allow us to access our database and essentially get the session so we can make requests and actually update things. So we're creating a function called getSession, and I'll update this inside of that article too if you want to know more. So we're going to use session local. So we're going to specify the session inside of the getSession function, and then we're going to do try yield. This is YILD like that, yield, and then we're just going to do session. And then we're just going to go ahead and do finally. I want to make sure you can see the code here. And this will be, let's see, session.close. All right, so we have a function now to actually get the session. Shuvo's asking, can you teach me PyScript? Yeah, I'm not into that. I don't like the idea of PyScript. I think it's cool, I guess, but Python in the front end, that seems a little bit weird. Okay, so we have our get session function, and let's go ahead and actually access our database. So to recap, created our database and all the configurations, created our models, made some imports here, created the actual database, and now it's time to access this. So get items right here. So let's go ahead and modify this. We're just going to go ahead and change this. So instead of accessing our fake database, we're going to go ahead and get all the items. So inside of the get items function, we're going to go ahead and get the session here, and session will be session. And then we're going to do equals depends, and we're just going to go ahead and call get underscore session. So we're going to go ahead and call this function right here. So this is going to give us access to the database, and then we're just going to go ahead and specify the items, and this is going to be session.query. So now we're working with the SQL Alchemy ORM, and this is going to be session.query, and we want to query models.item, so that object, and we want to query all the items. So this is the beauty of FastAPI. I don't have to serialize this data like I would in Django. So we get all the items, and this should now work. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out. And at this point, we shouldn't have any items in the database. So let's go ahead and refresh it, and we should see an empty Python list, or I guess JSON array. So let's try it out. We'll execute it, and here we have nothing. So we have this empty list, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we need. So let's go ahead and actually add some items before we work on getting back a single item. So we'll go back into our post request now, and let's go ahead and just modify this one. So we're going into add item. And at this point, we still have item schemas. That looks good. So we're just going to go ahead and get this session right here. And we're just going to paste this into add item. So bring this down here. So we get our session here. And now what we need to do here is go ahead and remove new ID. So that's going to be auto-generated. So we just need to go ahead and create a variable for our item. And we're just going to say models.item. And this is going to be equal to task. So we're updating the specific attribute. So we're updating the task attribute of this item model, or this item class. And we're going to say the task is equal to item.task. So that's from the schema right here using Pydantic. We're accessing the task value. We're going to update it. Then we're just going to go ahead and add this to the actual database. So we're just going to do session.add. And we want to add the new item to the database. Then we're just going to go ahead and do session.commit. And we'll just do session.refresh. Okay, so we're going to refresh it, and we're just going to go ahead and throw in item like that. Okay, so we don't need this anymore. I can remove that, and let's just go ahead and return back the item. Okay, so let's go ahead and check this out. So I'll save all this. We're actually adding an item to the database. We'll go back to the front end. Okay, so give it a second. It'll need to update. Okay, so we have add item, try out, and we'll just say this is our first item. Let's go ahead and execute it. Looks like everything is good. We see our first item. The ID is 1 now. And if I go to get items, try it out, execute, here we have our list. Now, when I refresh this or turn my server on and off, now it's not going to remove all the data from our database because we're actually storing this inside of that SQLite database. So it's all there now. This data will not be removed. Now we actually have some form of real database, even though SQLite is usually not for production, but we have data actually stored now. So we have our first item. Let's go ahead and just add in a second item. We'll just do, this is our second item. We'll execute it, and we'll just add in that right there. So at least we have something, or we have a little bit more here. So let's execute that, and let's see. Okay, so Now what I want to do is actually get a particular item. So we'll go back into our code here. So we added the item. I just wanted to skip to that step just to make sure we actually had some data. So we'll go into get item now, and we're going to do the same thing. We're getting that session so we can access the database, and we're going to access this specific item here. So we'll do item, and this is going to be equal to session.query. And we're just going to go ahead and get the model of item, and we're going to call get. So instead of all, we're going to do get, and we're going to get back the item by its ID value. So we're just going to go ahead and get this ID, and that's going to query a specific item. So we fix the indentation here, save it, and let's just return the item. Okay, so that should return back a single item. Let's check this out. Okay, so we have get item. We have 2 items in the database. So let's get the first one, try it out. We'll get 1, execute. There we go. This is our first item. And then if I want to get item number 2, execute. And then if I do 3, I think it's just going to throw an error. Yeah, so we have an error, or I guess it's null. There's no item in the database with that ID. Okay, so that's how we get an item by its path parameter from the actual database. Let's move on to updating an item. So we're almost done with our CRUD operations. So let's go into update. So here we still have the integer. We still have the schemas. We want to get our session. Okay, so we'll throw that in right there. So that's inside of the update item route. And I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see that or see all of it. And at this point, let's remove our fake database. And what we're going to do here is just go ahead and get the item and then modify it. So let's see. Trying to remember how I did this. So we have item. We're going to go ahead and get the item. So let's just use the same method right here. So we're getting the item. Oh no, that's to modify it. So let's go back to get item. So we're going to specify this. And I might need to update the actual article. It looks like I have some mistakes there because I'm actually following that right now, and that's what's throwing me off. So let me just think about this, think about it clearly by myself without actually referencing the article. So we have our item. Once we get the item, we're just going to go ahead and start modifying it. So I think we can just do item.task. Then we should be able to just do item.task like that from the front end. So let's actually call this item object because I think this name right here might actually conflict. So we're just going to go ahead and specify that, update the task. This is going to be from the Pydantic schema. We're updating the task value. And then we're just going to go ahead and do session.commit. So we're going to commit these changes, and then we want to return back this item. So we'll just return back item object. And then we'll just make sure that it's updating the actual database. Okay, so save it, refresh it. Let's check this out, see if this is working. So we'll go into our put request. So we want to update the first item. So we'll just do 1, and then we'll just do first item was updated, execute, and it looks like we have an error. So let's see what's going on here. Yeah, something's not right here. So get session. Oh, I see what I did. Added in 2 commas there. Okay, so we're going into our put request, updating the first item. All right, execute, and here we go. First item was updated. So if I go back here, actually, let me slow down. Okay, so first item was updated. I realized I went really fast here. Let's go back up to get items. Let's see how that looks. Let's try it out, execute. And here we go. First item was updated, and we still have our second item. So that's how we update an item in the database. Okay, so let's go into deleting items. So deleting items is going to be very easy. We're just sending a delete request and then simply removing that item from the database. So we're still going to go ahead and use session right here. So we still need to get all this information. We only need the ID to get the item. We're just going to go ahead and access the object right here. Throw that in right there. And then we're just going to do item object. And then we're just going to call, let's see, how are we going to delete this? So we'll just call delete. So we're actually going to use session. So session dot delete, and then we need to specify the item that we're deleting. So item object, we're deleting this. Yeah, I definitely need to update the article. So if you're following it right now, it might be a little bit outdated or messed up. So I'll go ahead and fix all of this. Okay, so session dot commit. Let's do two S's there, session dot commit, and then we'll just do session dot close. Okay, and then we'll just say item was deleted. All right, let's go ahead and check this out. We're passing in the ID. Refresh it. Let's go to delete. Let's delete the first item. Execute. Item was deleted. So let's go back into get items. Let's make sure it was actually removed. Execute. And now we only have one item in the list. All right, so that's it for this CRUD application. So we're not dealing with the front end. If you want to use some kind of front end like React, Vue, Angular, Svelte, that's all up to you. I loved working with this Swagger UI docs that we get with FastAPI. I'll probably end up doing videos or maybe even a full tutorial on comparing Django, Flask, FastAPI and making comparisons to them, maybe building out the same API with all three. But yeah, that's all I wanted to do here is show you those CRUD operations. We got this done in an hour. This video will be posted after, so I want to make sure to keep it as short as possible. So I'll probably end the stream right here. But with that, make sure you reference the article. I'm going to update it. That's all linked in the video description. And the source code that we just worked on will be in that article. So make sure you go to the article and then you'll have all the source code right here. So I created a placeholder somewhere here. So let's see, at the very top of the article, we have the stream URL. So that's this stream URL. We have source code. I said it'll be added right here. So I'll make sure to add that. In fact, what I'm going to do here is quickly just push this to GitHub. And then if you want to ask some questions, go ahead and do that. I'll try to keep the stream at about an hour and 5 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes. I figured a little bit more time won't hurt it. So while I am pushing this to GitHub, go ahead and ask some questions, interact in the chat. But let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and push this. So give me a second here. I just need to open up my GitHub account and I'll be watching the chat. Oh, I'm really losing my voice. It's getting tough to talk. Okay, so give me a second. Okay, so let's bring in GitHub here and we'll go into my repositories. We'll go to new repos and we're going to call this FastAPI CRUD app live stream. This is kind of a long repo name, but let's go ahead and do that. And I won't add a description yet. We'll leave it as public. I'll maybe update this later. If somebody wants to add a README to it, I'd love for you to make that commit or that PR, and I will approve it. So let's go ahead and create the repo. And what I'm going to do here is go to Medium right now, and I'm going to edit this article, and then I need to push the code. So we'll go in here. Source code is now linked up. There we go. So that's the source code. Save and publish it. So I just updated the article. So now you can access this. This is all in the video description. Might take a second to actually update that. Okay, so while that's updating, let's go ahead and actually push this to GitHub. So we'll just do git init, git add. I'll just move my face out of here just in case I'm blocking any code. So git add, git commit -m. Svelte tutorial. I actually got to do that. I've tried Svelte one time. I just need to sit down and study it, write up an article just like I did today, and maybe I'll just live stream it. I really enjoy doing this. Okay, so we made the commit. We'll just do git push -u origin master. Oh, I need to get the remote here. So go back into GitHub and we'll just add it. Kind of sucks that we started off with a bug because this stream is going to be posted after, and now that's always going to be there. Okay. Git push -u origin. All right, so source code should be updated. Like I said, if anybody wants to submit a PR, give me a README file on how to set this up and maybe a description, I would love that. I'll approve it. So that's all inside of this article. Now, if I refresh it, the link should be here. So here we go. We have the source code. Again, this article is in the video description. All right, so how easy is it to add status codes? Very easy. There's a lot of content on this in the FastAPI documentation. Yeah, when I was looking through it, I just didn't go through that right now because we're focusing on CRUD. So yeah, adding those status codes are actually pretty easy. Here, let me stop sharing my screen here, and I'll just look through some of the chat here. Yeah, I got to get that Svelte tutorial. Django React course. I actually have one. I know that the second React 18 came out, it was outdated. I mean, it's not outdated because it's, I mean, you don't always have to have the latest code. So yeah, it sucks because people always want that. So that usually means to a lot of people, it will be outdated. The stream is over. We're just going to post this after. Let's see. Is there a better way to work on simple projects for beginners live? I don't know what you mean by live, but yeah, I'm not exactly sure what that question means. Authentication. Yeah, I do need to. I want to work with authentication. With FastAPI, you'd probably be using JSON web tokens for that. So yeah, we'll have to do a video on that and maybe use something like React on the front end to actually handle the authentication. All right, so that's it for this tutorial. It's at 1 hour and 7 minutes. This will be posted after. Again, it sucks that we had the bug in the beginning, but hey, that's life. We'll see you guys later. And again, thanks to Agora for essentially sort of sponsoring the stream, even though it's not actually sponsored, but for letting me work on their time with that. I got to get back to work with some other stuff. So, all right, see you all later.